Hi there. Welcome to Finding Your Inner Mr. Rogers. I'm Todd Faber. And I believe that in a world of noise and speed, the most radical thing we can be is kind. We often think of leadership as being in charge, but Fred Rogers taught us that true leadership is about being in service to the dignity of others. Today I welcome Chris Schuster. With over 30 years of experience in healthcare administration, she is a rare leader who moved from the bedside to the boardroom. A former ICU nurse, she now serves as the president and CEO of Emerson Hospital, where she oversees a high-performance system with a deeply human touch. Chris is a vocal advocate for compassion as a core competency, proving every day that leading a major medical institution requires equal parts clinical experience and a nursing heart of empathy. She recently wrote about how compassion is a soft skill isn't a soft skill, but a core competency which perfectly mirrors Fred Rogers' philosophy. Welcome to the neighborhood, Chris.
Thanks, Todd. I'm so happy to be here today and to talk with you about something that's my passion, healthcare.
Well, I'm very appreciative of it, and I don't know if you remember this. When we first met, it sort of dawned on me a couple of days ago as I was thinking about this podcast. Um, my wife Jen will laugh at this, but she finds it true that I'm usually late to just about everything. And you and I met at a BC CEO Club lunch several years ago. I actually was late because I went to the um, Boston Harbor Hotel as opposed to the one in Back Bay where the meeting was occurring. And I was late, missed the whole cocktail hour and the networking session. And I was sort of like that kid in high school or middle school walking around with his lunch tray looking for a place to sit. And there was a seat next to you, and you just welcomed me in. And it was just so generous of you. And you were so nice. We had never met. We didn't even know that we both lived in Sudbury. And so it really felt very welcoming. And I know you and I also talked a little bit about this a few weeks ago, but when I was at one of my regular visits to your hospital, and I was sitting in the bed in the emergency room, and I was actually texting with you, letting you know I was there. And one of your nurses came up to me and said, Todd, you need to put your phone down because we're trying to do some tests. And I said, well, hold on a second. I'm texting with your CEO. And she goes, oh my God, I love Chris. And she spent 5 minutes just raving about you and your leadership. And that sort of serves as a catalyst for me as to why I actually wanted to have you as part of this podcast. So it's
Well, and I think I'm honored to be here because, running an organization like Emerson, and any healthcare organization, it is about being part of a team. And it is, as the leader, understanding and knowing my staff and appreciating all they do, not just to help our patients, but it's really important that they support each other. And that's really part of the culture at Emerson. I've been there now 21 years. I'm the longest sitting male or female president and CEO of an independent hospital in Massachusetts. And, I've been there so long and advocating for patients because I truly believe it's the right thing to do. I'm one of those rare birds that loves the work that I do. Believe me, in healthcare, it's never boring. But I'm also, I grew up playing sports. My family was a big sports family. We still are today. And I look at the hospital, it's a team sport, healthcare. You can't care for patients the way they need to be cared for unless you have a team of people at the administrative level and the frontline level and behind the scenes doing all that work that people don't see, but is so critical for making sure the patient's experience is a good one.
it's a testament to you for, again, being the longest standing president or CEO. But it's even deeper than that because what you're talking about always goes to the core of leadership. Because without great leadership and without people feeling like they're part of a team, and that's your job in part, is to make them feel that way, it doesn't work. Now, you started your career as a critical care nurse. And Fred Rogers used to say that the roots of a person's ability to care are in their early experiences. So, how do you feel that your nursing heart, for lack of a better term, influenced the way you now have to make very difficult decisions as a CEO without really negatively impacting the culture of the hospital?
So I I am still an RN. I do keep my license up just in case in a pinch they need me to do something. Um, but the bottom line is, I am a people person and I care about people. I loved being an ICU nurse, but I realized at one point that I was able to impact patients and families only one patient at a time. And if I wanted to have more of an impact on the system, that I needed to do something different. So I went off to the University of Chicago, got my MBA, spent a lot of time, at Coopers and Lybrand, now Price Waterhouse Coopers, doing hospital turnarounds and seeing firsthand all the things that I wouldn't do to run a successful organization. And so, spent 5 years evaluating different leaders, their work style, learning the inside business, of the hospital. And, it's very clear to me that, when people are seen, listened to, appreciated, then they feel valued and they want to be a part of something bigger. And I do think that's the culture at Emerson. We appreciate staff a lot, we value them. I feel like the front line is where I get the best ideas for how to do things better. And I there is a balance between, having to listen and have people feel valued and being able to, maintain our viability as really one of the strongest community hospitals in the Commonwealth. So it's really letting people feel comfortable. The things people tell me, the fact that they know they can stop into my office, but it's not just me, it's my entire senior leadership team. And, culture doesn't start with one person. It's really the management team and how they care for the people that work with them. And so at Emerson, we're not very hierarchical. I'd say we're very flat in the sense that, everyone has a voice and we listen. And if sometimes I have to have hard conversations with people saying that's an interesting idea, we can't do it and this is why. So to the extent possible, trying to have transparency, about what we're doing, where we're going, and how we're going to get there.
It's interesting because you talk about hard conversations, and I'm a big proponent of when we acknowledge something, that goes to the very core of being compassionate and empathetic. So if you're acknowledging that you're having a hard conversation, that shows deep down who you really are as a person, as opposed to simply just saying, I'm going to have this conversation without acknowledging that this is a difficult thing to do. And so it kind of leads to my next thing. I read somewhere that you once wrote, that having compassion doesn't necessarily mean lowering standards, but it's sort of courageous to be able to communicate what your expectations are very clearly. And, there's an old school leadership myth that being kind makes a leader less effective or a company or an organization less profitable, which is the antithesis of the whole reason I'm doing this podcast, right? Like, I want to show that kindness and compassion and empathy can lead to greater productivity. So how do you feel about that statement and how you take that in your daily life, at Emerson?
I mean, in my experience, to be a really effective leader, you have to be highly compassionate and you have to balance that with being highly accountable. And it's um, often hard to do because sometimes you have to say no to things that maybe people say, oh, but this is, what we need to do. I find I say to my teams, put the patient at the center of everything we're doing, including the decisions we're making. And then the decision becomes a lot easier because we have to continually remember why we're here. And it does get challenging in an environment. We're a not-for-profit. We have a lot of for-profits entering this state. We have some that were in the state and collapsed. And, at the same time, if I want to really, my vision is to care for our community. And if we have a lot of for-profits cherry picking the for-profit service lines, that makes it harder for us to offer things like maternity, pediatrics, psychiatry, behavioral health. And we have a mental health crisis in this country. So, there is challenges to being highly compassionate and also fiscally responsible. And so trying to have those honest conversations with people. But I do think you have to have clarity and consistency in your purpose and how you lead. And that's what drives the results. And, at the end of the day, making sure wherever we meet people on their health journey is a good experience for them. And we can't be all things to all people, but we have to know, what and partner with places along the continuum of care that are going to make sure that our patients get what they need when they come to see us.
Well, I mean, you've clearly done that. Again, having spent time at your facility as a patient, you did talk a little bit about community in there, and thinking back 6 years ago, almost exactly 6 years ago, during the height of the pandemic, and Emerson being a community hospital, it also had to be kind of a safe neighborhood, right? And Mr. Rogers was all about his neighborhoods, and I'm curious because people were definitely fearful, right? They were fearful of going out of their house. They were fearful of going to a hospital. But you're a human being too. And so, how did you, as the CEO, but as a human being, maintain your sense of inner peace so that you could kind of be that grounding force of leadership to the thousands of employees who were frontline and clearly exhausted, right, from the whole process and dealing with patients. And you had to, like I said, be that grounding force. How were you able to manage yourself during that crisis?
So, one of the most difficult periods in my life, both personally and professionally, was when the pandemic hit. I had two children, one who was applying to medical school, the other who was applying to undergraduate school and only wanted to go to, a top school, so her own added pressure. And a few months into the pandemic, my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer. So not only was I dealing with being a CEO in the middle of a pandemic, which no one had ever been through, and dealing with my own personal, challenges at home. So I can truly say my role at that time was I didn't know what was going to happen. It was a crisis, and the whole healthcare system was in chaos. Think back about when people weren't leaving their houses. I used to drive from my house to Emerson Health and not see a soul on the road. Very much unlike where we are today. And so, as much as it was about keeping the hospital going, it was sort of about emotional stewardship. How was I going to make sure that this community felt safe? And my focus with my team, and we would sit in our conference room for up to 18 hours a day with the news on, with the little ticker for how many deaths were happening in the lower right-hand corner. And, realizing that it was up to us. And I knew I needed to take care of my staff if we were going to take care of patients. So we did everything for them. We made sure that they would all have scrubs. And so that when they came to work, they didn't feel like they were going to carry anything home with them. We gave them places to shower. Our Friends of Emerson, which used to be our auxiliary, ran a food pantry so that people could take a bag and come and not have to stop at the grocery shop after working, 12 hours. Which was really incredibly supportive. The community and the restaurateurs around Emerson provided us with food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner for months and months and months on end. And so we never knew what we were going to get. It could be Dunkin' Donuts in the morning, Bisou Sweets connections for a bunch of sweet snacks, and even fancy restaurants like 80 Thoreau and Woods Hill Table were supplying meals, to our staff. And so, the way the community came together with us, we had parades out front with, pots and pans banging there. The ambulance, fire, police did, parades right down Route 2 with big signs that said thank you and horns tooting. So I do feel like the community made us feel loved. And I think that's because of the great relationships that we have with the community here in Concord and surrounding areas and all our outposts. So, it was a very surreal time. And I will have to say, our deep clinical affiliation with Mass General Brigham, back inside, not sort of the soft things that help people feel good, we were meeting with that team regularly to make sure inside the hospital with the clinical care and all the things that we're going to do this, we're not going to do that, we're going to mask, we worked with their team. So we had the best and brightest minds, in healthcare. With when the new things came out, we were able to be right at the cutting edge of what we were going to implement to care for our community. And, they would send patients to us. We never ran out of supplies or drugs or anything, because we had this connection, because they are deeply rooted in the work that we do at Emerson. And I think of all the cancer patients that we cared for during that time where you can't stop treatment, and
Right.
how well the MGB, Emerson Cancer Center, did during that period of time. So it really, for us, wasn't about having perfect answers, but more about creating calm in the midst of an ongoing chaotic time for everyone. And this became deeply personal for some people, because I think of myself, having someone with cancer in the home. And how do you deal with that? So we were able to really listen to our employees and support them through, what became a really difficult time. So I think having a steady presence with myself and my team, communicating frequently and honestly, and not leaving the staff ever wondering about what we were doing or why we were doing it, not cutting people's pay, which I
Yeah.
think was really important while we were seeing all these things that were being cut across the country. And we said, we're not going to do that. We really valued that people came into work. And I think the love was deeply felt, you know, throughout our staff. I hope that it never happens again, because it was a really challenging time. But I think it's something that retrospectively, you know, we were able to keep our hospital together and we served our community well.
Well, it's clear that you had a great foundation in advance of it, and I think to your point, I mean nobody was prepared for it at all. I mean, it's not like people went to graduate school for pandemic response because it just didn't exist. And you mentioned that you didn't have a perfect answer, but you clearly had great outcomes because you were as prepared as you could be because of your leadership and your stewardship and the fact that your employees had already felt like they were part of the community and part of the solution to problems. And again, you look at leadership, and that's kind of the key, is to make sure that people feel as if they are appreciated, right? And so you look at Emerson, which, while it's a community hospital, is still a good sized system. And Mr. Rogers always talks about the helpers, right? I had a friend who wrote a book called Finding the Helpers after his daughter was murdered in a school shooting about, God, 8 years ago. And I read it, and it really resonated with me. And I think about these frontline workers, but I also think about the back office people, right? Your custodial staff, your cafeteria workers, your admins. And so the concept of the helpers, how did you sort of follow Mr. Rogers' concept of, making sure that all the people in your neighborhood, right, all these employees feel as if they're a part of the solution in terms of helping your patients heal?
So, I think our culture is unique and rare in this environment. I do think it's because of the stability of our medical staff. People come and stay there until they retire, as well as the senior leadership team. And, I think for us, neighborhood really means reinforcing a simple but a powerful truth at Emerson, is that there are no small roles here. It really doesn't matter what you do. We're not this kind of a structure. We're a very flat structure, meaning everyone has a job to do. Just because I'm the CEO, trust me, I'm not the most important person there.
I would
Everyone's
beg to
role is
differ,
important.
but that's okay.
No, but, honestly, the people at the bedside, being a clinician for me has been very powerful. And I'm always thinking about what's impacting our physicians and our nurses. our medical staff assistants, the people that draw their blood. I go get my blood drawn in Sudbury and, get to sit there and watch how busy they are and then, try to
I've
make
been
sure
there,
that
so
I'm
I know.
recognizing the work they do. So for us, when we celebrate staff, it isn't just people in the hospital. 80% of our revenue comes from our outpatient setting. So, it's making sure that we take care of people day shift, evening shift, night shift, weekends, and then all of our off post in Hudson, and Littleton and Groton. And so I think at Emerson, everyone's role is important because I do view it as a team sport. I love basketball, but you can't, you got to have good center as well as you got to have good, maybe we didn't at the Celtics lately, but I mean,
I
a
know.
real team is going to have stars at every position. And honestly, we do. And, we value and appreciate the role that people have. I love when I walk in there in the mornings and talk to the people at the front desk. We usually have one or two steady volunteers there, and one of them, knits and crochets. And I love, one day she's making a blanket for the babies in maternity. The next time she's making hats for people who are undergoing chemo. And, to me, it is a true community where we have so many volunteers, and many of them have come back since the pandemic. But before, we had about 600 volunteers, and including students, and a lot of people, they're older, maybe doing it in retirement. We wouldn't let them come in during the height of the pandemic, but now they're coming back, and it's just so great to see them. I was standing out front on a call, and when I was done, I sort of stopped and hung up, and I heard one of our gentlemen who was taking someone out to their car in a wheelchair talking about stock tips, right? And I was thinking, oh my God, I hope that, I hope it works out well, and maybe I should go talk to him. But it's that kind of conversation. And another time I heard someone, talking about what was, at lunch in the cafeteria, because a lot of seniors will come to our cafeteria just to have lunch, at some place that's reasonably priced, that they can come with their friends and have a good meal. And I don't know, maybe as you get older, you love hanging out in hospitals because you're going to need it at some point. But whatever it is that draws people in. And another great example is past weekend, we had the Emerson Run Walk, which we have annually, to provide funds for patients who are undergoing cancer services at the Emerson Mass General Brigham Cancer Center on campus. Over 670 people showed up in the rain
Wow.
Saturday morning. And they were all there for a purpose, right? To make sure that our cancer patients get what they need, above and beyond the medical and clinical protocols that are in place in the radiation oncology. So, I guess, for me, Mr. Rogers really resonates with me because it is all about making people feel safe and comfortable in the neighborhood. Our neighborhood's big. It's for the patients, but most important, it's for the people who care for the patients. Because if I don't take care of them, the doctors and the staff, they're never going to allow our patients to have a great experience when they walk through the door. And, I harken back to the stories over the years. I still remember a woman who came by and told me, I know that the aide wasn't supposed to do this, but, she wanted a McDonald's. It was in the month of March. They have that mint shake. I forget what it was, Shamrock shake
The
or something.
Shamrock, yeah.
That person would stop by every day and get her one. She did check to see if it was on the patient's diet, and it was. But to me, it's a great story of the little things that we do. And I get letters and emails all the time. And most of the time, they are spot on with the great care that they've gotten and how people have gone above and beyond, whether it's, someone who was passing away and, it was planned so the dog could come in, the family members could come in, candles in the room, which we usually don't allow, only in extreme situations. And so we got the ones that don't have an open flame. The music and, how that person's end of life experience, was fabulous. I don't know that I would be defining one like that, but for this person, it was because of the extra things that we did for the patient. So, sometimes I feel like healthcare has become too much of a business, and as long as I'm where I'm at, I'm going to try to continue to find the human side of it, the personal side of it. And, it's all about making a difference. I think because I live and work here, people reach out to me all the time, family, friends, people who even say they know me but don't, but that's okay. I
They feel like
love,
they do.
that I can help them navigate, which has become a very complex, as you well know, medical system,
Yes.
right? And people can't find primary care physicians. They don't know what specialists to go to. And not that you make the decision for them, but you help them to understand the roads they can take, to get whatever it is they need, primary care, a new orthopedic surgeon, a rehab center. And for me, I could wake up every morning and it's a good day for me if I've made a difference in someone's life. And that difference could be that I just opened the door for them or got them a PCP referral, or it could be cutting a deal with someone who's going to bring a lot of business to Emerson, or is going to allow us to care for patients in different ways than we have, or hiring a high achieving physician. So a lot goes into the neighborhood and making it what it is. This Friday, we'll be celebrating, we have what we call service awards, one of my favorite days of the year, where we literally honor people who work at Emerson. And, it starts at 5 years and it goes up to sometimes over 50 years. And just the videos and the pictures of, people, we just don't, we show them with their teams because that's what it is. It's, people don't work in isolation here. And the back office people are just important as the clinicians, because if we can't get the bills out the door and get them out accurately, that's a problem as well. So, I think for us, Mr. Rogers would have loved visiting our neighborhood.
Well, you may know his mom was a hospital volunteer for about 25 years, so I'm 100% sure he would have enjoyed it. You mentioned, I think you mentioned something a little bit about rock stars, right? So your CIO, Renee, is a rock star. I mean, she's absolutely fabulous and has brought some great technology and digital innovation to the hospital. You guys have been considered most wired by various publications. But as you know, being a clinical care nurse, healthcare is still about the human touch, right? But as we evolve in society and as other things come to pass, whether it's using technology to actually provide services or technology for the back office stuff, technology is an integral part of healthcare and other businesses across the world to make us more efficient. But I'd be curious to know how you look at the use of technology by doctors and on behalf of patients that helps provide the patient better outcomes, but at the same time doesn't stand as an impediment between the relationship between the doctor and the patient.
So, that I think it's interesting, and you're absolutely right. Renee, I've mentored her for years, is a rock star. A regional Orby, which is like the rock stars in high tech award winner, and now she's up to be a finalist. And she's really led our organization to receive many, many awards. And she's working now on having us implement a new hospital IT system. And, I'm so proud of all the work she's done. Again, another superstar on my team. But you need to have high touch and high tech. And, we can't be behind. We use the technology in two ways. How can we make it easier for patients to access our system? And that's always an ongoing process, because you have to balance that, because some of the technologies are expensive. How do you balance that, with other needs that you have? And so that's always a challenge in the community setting. But with our partnership with MGB, we're able to put things like Epic in, and that has really helped our patients be attached to the system. We're also really evaluating our use of AI. And so, we have a committee that, when you're taking care of people's lives and you're entrusted with that, you have to be very careful about how you use non-human technology. So we evaluate things very carefully, but one of the things we're trialing now is something called ambient listening, and how we can assist our medical staff with hearing everything that's said in a visit, and transcribing that in a way that makes sure we understand all the patient's needs. And using the technologies to deliver better patient care, whether it's a certain system that our orthopedic surgeons want to make sure when they put a new hip or a knee in, it's 100% aligned. whether it's adding AI to our Westford MRI, which has for patients decreased scan time by over 50%. So think if you had to regularly have an MRI that was an hour, now it's only a half an hour, and it's in a wider bore, so you don't feel as claustrophobic. So, I think that way we've used high tech has really helped our patients' experience, and we'll continue to make that a high priority as we evaluate every day what's the most responsible way to use the tools that we have to make sure our patients have a good experience, and also using it in ways to support our staff, right? What can we do in the back office? If it's just counting widgets or whatever, I don't necessarily need a person to do that. I can free the person up to do something else that's going to add value to the patient experience. So it is a balance, and I think we've been striking the balance just right.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about the use of AI. I think two things sort of came out to me. The ambient listening piece I think is wonderful because it allows the doctor or the nurse or whoever the clinician is working with the patient to actually have this kind of interface as opposed to that kind of interface, right? That they're able to hear and absorb everything and the patient feels heard. And that's a big part of any community or any neighborhood when you're in a leadership role or a coworker role or doctor patient role where somebody feels heard. And I think it's great that you guys are using that. Anecdotally though, I find it funny the MRI thing. See, I've had probably like 50 MRIs in my life, like way too many. I usually fall asleep in them. Conversely, Jen, my wife, hates them because she feels claustrophobic. So the next time she has to have an MRI, I'll be sure to tell her about this new tech because it might make her feel a little bit bigger, better.
Yeah, especially
Being
up in our Westford
bigger.
site, with our Shields partner. It's patients are rave about it.
Good.
And, we had to expand our hours, offer weekend hours, um, because it made it easier for the patients. And, we'll be adding one of those to the hospital in the next year or two. So that experience will be available there. But I mean, at the end of the day, when I really think about it, I mean, when people feel seen, heard, safe, in their work environment, then they're capable of doing amazing things, of growing, of developing connections that are going to foster good relationships in the workplace. And when you do all that, I think then good things happen. It's reflected in our quality of care with our Leapfrog A score, which is coming out today, with a Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, 5 stars. So just like the hotel and restaurant rating systems, we're able to do that when you have a healthcare team that, again, is listened to, is valued, is appreciated. And, that's for me what it's all about. Even though I've kind of gone from the bedside to the boardroom, I still feel like I haven't lost touch about why I'm there. It's for the patients. For the patients to get great care, I have to take care of my staff. And so, that for me is real what it's all about. And I think Mr. Rogers would be proud of Emerson if he was around today.
I agree. And I do think that you sort of hit the nail on the head with the fact that you're passing along your skill set and your leadership qualities as you're mentoring people. You mentioned that you mentored Renee, and I'm sure that you've mentored a lot of the nurses and other folks in the hospital over the years. Fred Rogers often talked about as an individual, we should think about the people around us who kind of loved us into being, for lack of a better term. And so as a leader, you've, as I mentioned, mentored so many people. Is there anybody in particular who kind of loved you into being the leader you are today?
Started with my parents. My dad was a pharmacist, had his own store, and
No kidding. Okay.
started out, working as a soda jerk. And while I watched him caring for kind of an underserved neighborhood, in Massachusetts, and saw how he cared for people. My mom worked in the Department of Mental Health, and the story she would tell about, how the team there was really making a difference with people who had a lot of mental health challenges for whatever reason. Really, for my sister and I, we came from a household of wanting to care for people. And for me, that translated into being a nurse and then, wanting to have a greater impact, as a CEO. And, that was just sort of more my foundation. And then along the way, I was really blessed to have great women hospital CEO role leaders, and Elaine Julian, who brought University Hospital together with Boston City to make Boston Medical Center that's, thriving today. And when I worked at Quincy Medical, I reported into her. And man, talk about tough love. I learned so much from that woman. And she didn't suffer fools kindly. I mean, she gave you the positive, but more important, the constructive feedback about what I could do to be a better, CEO. And then I was exposed to Ellen Zane, who's just another classic, um, unbelievable president and CEO of Tufts Medical. And, I have to say, she was another person that, tough love, but I learned and I got a chance to, watch them up close and personal. And so those are two people that I feel like really helped me be the leader that I am today. And neither one of them was particularly clinical. And so that sort of added my own brand of, why I'm here. So, again, for me, it's about learning from the best, learning from the constructive feedback that isn't always easy. And I call it tough love, but I say to my team, do you just want me to, it goes to your point earlier of like, if you're just being nice to everyone and kind, how are you holding them accountable for outcomes and, performance? And it is a balance, but you're going to get both of that when, you work with me. And at the end of the day, I think about the team I have surrounding me. Many of them have been named to Becker's Healthcare for the best CIO, best chief marketing officer, best chief nurse. And, I look at it's a reflection of how I'm recognized for things on behalf of Emerson. And that's because we have a really good, strong team. And to be able to have open, candid, transparent conversations that are data-based, as opposed to I feel, really leads to better performance. And so as much as I love my team, I love watching them be the best they can be. Why? It's going to make sure in our community that we can go to bed at night and know that we're meeting people wherever they are on their health journey, and we're giving them the best possible care that we can give. And I sleep like a baby every night because of that.
I could use some of that sleep. I will tell you, it's first of all, I think we owe your parents a huge debt of gratitude, and your two mentors a huge debt of gratitude, because without them, obviously, we wouldn't have you. We wouldn't have you in our neighborhood. Your staff wouldn't have you. The patients wouldn't have you, and it's a testament not just to them, but to you in terms of how you took that information and those experiences and created, again, this wonderful organization that people feel, hey, I'm part of the solution, right? I'm not part of the problem, I'm part of the solution. And that's the key to any organization, whether it's healthcare, high tech, life sciences, nonprofits, it doesn't matter. If you're starting from the top with someone, and you talked a little bit about hard conversations, you talked about the tough love, but at the end of the day, to my point earlier, when you acknowledge that that's part of a conversation, that in and of itself is compassion. It is empathy, because you're acknowledging that, hey, this is going to be difficult for them. And that when you set the stage for that or set the tone for that, people are going to take that not personally, but take it as constructive. And to me, that's a hallmark of great leadership, is to be able to do that. And certainly in a healthcare situation where it is life and death, right? There's no two ways about it. It is life and death, whether it's in a pandemic like we had 6 years ago, or today where it's still life and death, whether it's cancer patients or other folks, and having someone at the helm that you trust, having someone at the helm that trusts you, having someone at the helm who can empathize with you because they experienced that as a frontline worker is wonderful. And Yes, I do firmly believe that Mr. Rogers would love you. He would love the hospital. He would love what you created. And as a community resident and a frequent patient, I certainly appreciate you and I appreciate the hospital. And I want to thank you for sort of taking the time to show us what a kind, compassionate, and empathetic leader looks like. So thank you
Well,
for
thank you so
joining.
much. And I still have a lot of work to do. The advocacy goes, beyond my neighborhood to other neighborhoods, whether it's through my work with the Health Policy Commission or the Mass Health and Hospital Association, really trying to, as you alluded to, be a part of the solution as opposed to being part of the problem. And the best part about healthcare is we have so many amazingly dedicated leaders in this state at all levels of government and my peers. And I just find a lot of joy in getting together with them, even the insurers, and trying to, find solutions to the challenges we have. And so thank you so much for having me. And I hope I don't see you soon,
Well,
at the hospital anyway, but
well,
certainly around town.
I'm happy just to come visit and say hello. How about that?
Sounds like a plan.
All right, Chris. Listen, you have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you again.
Thank you too. Thanks for having me.
All right, bye bye.